So this is a quick overview of an automation method you can use to match your leads to a contact. And the goal of this is to decide whether a lead is new or existing. So I've got two options to show. The first one is a single table version, i.e. where leads and contacts are kind of the same thing. It's a flat structure, so every single lead that comes in doesn't link off to any other data that would identify whether that is the same contact as one from before it or not. The second version I have is where we have two tables, the first of which is contacts, which is like our master list of all the contacts that we have, and the second table is leads. And our goal there is to match the leads to the contacts in order to determine whether a lead is from a new contact or from an existing one. So we'll start with the single table version, which is a little bit simpler. So the most important thing here is that the email address is essentially our most important field here. We are treating it as unique for each contact. So let's see the automation in action. Usually we're going to be watching for records being created in this table. So let's assume there's a form submission happening here. Just to demonstrate that, I'm going to duplicate one of these records. And what you'll notice is that this new record here has linked to the previous record before it from the same email address, right? And if we look on the right-hand side, we'll see that it has determined this lead as from an existing contact. Let's have a quick look at the automation that does that for us. So here is our single table automation. The trigger is that a record is created, or in the demonstration I just did there, duplicated. And the first step is to find records. We're going to find in the same table records based on a condition. And what we'd like to find is other records where the email address is the same as the email address of the new record we just created. So basically, do any old records have the same email address as this? Great. If they match, we also want to check that the records that this is finding is not the record that was just created. Otherwise, what you would end up doing is linking the new record to itself, which doesn't help anyone. So what you do there is we check that the record ID of any records that it's finding in the table is not the same as the record ID that triggered this, aka the one we just created. So basically, find all of the things with the same email address, but not me. We then add a conditional group. We've given a helpful description here. And the conditions here are that this find records found one or more records. The reason we want to do one or more is that if a third or fourth lead comes in, we want the same behavior to happen and that we will link to all of those matched records. So assuming that we did find a match, what we'll want to do is go to the matching leads field and update it with a list of all of the matching record IDs from that table. And just to demonstrate that one more time, if we create further duplicates of that data, each one is going to pass through that automation, and it's going to find one more than the previous one did. And that's because it's doing every single past one before. The structure of that doesn't actually matter for this execution, because really we just want to know, is this new or existing, i.e. was it the first one we've ever done, or was it a repeat lead? Okay, so that's our single table. Now let's have a look at our double table version. This is a much more robust structure to your data, so if you have this option, you should definitely use it. So in the first table, we have contacts with the same kind of data that we had in the first one. They have a name, an email address, a link to the leads table, and also a count of the number of leads they have. And if you haven't used count fields before, that is just looking at this linked record field and counting how many there are. In the leads table, we actually have the same information repeated here, which I'll tell you about in a second. We have the link back to the master contact. We have a lookup on the count to show how many leads this contact has had. And then finally, a formula that decides whether this is new or existing. That formula is pretty simple. It says, is the number of leads that this contact has greater than or equal to 2? The reason why we have duplicated information in this table, i.e. why would you have a repeat of name and email address, is because this is information submitted by a user, and if that user is submitting a form, they're going to have re-entered their name and email address here at some point. You may later want to remove that data and use lookups from your contact to have this kind of definite single source of truth of always having, say, exactly the same name and that kind of information about the contact. But for now, we're treating this as just form submissions without any further clever functionality. So let's have a look at our double table automation. The structure is similar for the trigger. So when a record is created in the leads table, that's our form submissions coming in, we're going to do a find on the contacts table. And the condition here is that the email address is equal to the email address. Again, that is our unique identifier for all of this information here. Now this time, because it's not the same table, we're not expecting that we might link back to ourselves because the lead that's coming in isn't linking to a lead, it's linking to a separate table. So we don't need that extra condition here. We then have two conditional groups. The first one is that triggers when it found a matching contact. And that is saying here that find records is greater than or equal to 1. You might want to add some validation later on to check for duplicates, because if you found more than one contact with the same email address, you've probably got some bad data in there. At some point, something's gone a little bit wrong. But here, we just want to know, are there any contacts with this email address? And they should almost always come back as just one match. If so, we then update the lead, that's the form submission, and we tell it to link to the list of master contacts that we just found in our find. Again, hopefully that is 1. If, however, our find didn't return any records, that means that this is a new contact. So what we'll do to kind of enrich our data in this base is we're going to actually create a contact and link to our lead. So for example, because we know the name and email address from our lead, we're just going to paste that information into a new record in the contacts table, and then lastly, link to the lead that has just come in. So this is the ID of the triggered lead record, and it's going to link to our new contact. So just to demonstrate that, I'm now going to duplicate this lead from James Blake. The automation will run. It will find the contact in the contacts table and link to it for us. I'll now demonstrate what happens if we have a lead come in from a new contact. So we'll put in here a new email address and submit our form. And then if we take a look in the base, you'll see that John Smith won't be able to find a matching contact. So instead, it creates a new one and links back to it. Okay, I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much.